Who are you? What do you do? Who are you? What do you do? Who are you? What do you do?
Were you ever considering taking the cloth?
No, there is this massive misconception about religious studies and me. I think you said that I was Durham University doing divinity.
Theology, yeah, that's what I thought, but not.
Yeah, and that is a great story, but it couldn't be further from the truth.
Oh, Nottingham, right?
Nottingham Trent University to do business studies, so about as far removed as you can get.
I went to Nottingham Trent. You know that sort of thing about it being heavily balanced towards ladies, and when they, you know,
what is
yeah,
Nottingham?
Absolutely, yeah. And,
6-to-1 female-male ratio.
Oh goodness!
Couldn't have been further from the truth. I got beaten up in a car park, and then I had to sleep outside. And
by 6 ladies as well.
Yeah, exactly.
All fighting over him.
Yeah.
So, yeah, going back to my divinity thing.
Yes, sorry.
I did O-level religious studies, and there were 4 of us, which soon became 3 of us. And so 3 of us went through Bedford Modern School doing O-level religious studies. And Simon Rutt and I thought, as a A-level, would it be that bad? Said to the school, we'd like to look at doing A-level religious studies. And the school said, well, that's going to be tricky. We don't have the capacity teaching-wise. And so we said, yeah, but we'd really like to do it. And about a week later, they came back to us and said, we've solved the problem. You'll have to go to Dame Alice School with all the girls to do religious studies. Now, we were like, well, that is an absolute result. And then imagine our shock and horror when we got back to BMS in the September to find they'd employed a religious studies teacher. And so the two of us then had to sort of stick to our guns and do A-level religious studies.
With not a girl in sight.
Not a girl in sight.
What was the name of that guy, that teacher?
Well, there was David Kendall, and then there was Nick O'Sullivan, who...
He was a youngish guy. He seemed quite a good bloke. I had a run-in with him on the rugby pitch. Do you remember this?
Did you?
Who? Nick O'Sullivan?
Is that his name? Yes. The guy who was he like your tutor, or he was just your A-level teacher or something?
A-level teacher. I think he did some work in the boarding house, didn't he?
I don't remember. But no, he was just, I'd never met him before, had anything to do with him. But no, I was playing I was in a rugby game, and me and Gav Black were not participating. We were just walking around chatting, and he ran past and sort of gave me a really big shove in the back. And I don't know if you remember, but at school it was a real sort of, it was like a barrack room lawyer. Everyone knew that if a teacher hit you, you were allowed to hit them back. Because they weren't allowed to hit you. So I ran after him and shoved him, and then he turned out and squared up to me, and obviously thought better of it. You know, saw his career flash before his eyes, and then I went back to the boarding house, all cocky and dickhead, and was like, "Hey, I pushed a teacher, and he bottled it," and you basically very calmly and maturely told me what, I'd been an absolute shit, and he was a really nice guy. And so I went and apologized to him the next day, and he was really sound about it.
Yeah, he was a nice guy, as I recall.
Let's get started on Ed.
Let's do
it. Yeah, sure.
Spend hours talking about everyone we went to school with.
This is all deflection, because I don't reckon I've got enough material here. And in true teacher style, I haven't really prepared that much.
Yes, but years of experience mean you're going to be able to take 5 minutes material and drag it out to last the allotted time.
Absolutely. I'll split you two both into breakout rooms for probably about 20 minutes at a time.
Yeah. Right. Man of God, Tell us about yourself. Who are you? What do you do? Where do you do this thing? And how long have you been doing it?
Well, Ed Seymour, age 53. I feel like I'm on Take Me Out now. Age 53, teacher, selective grammar school in Kent. I've been teaching for 23 years.
Whoa.
And teaching at this particular school for 15, so since 2008.
Whoa. So we'll come back to the teaching then, but the 23 years, my very bad maths means that you were 30 when you became a teacher, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell what can you list all your what did you do before that?
I think the first ever job I remember doing would have been working as a relief postman, maybe around Bedford, after I'd finished school, with a whole host of misfits and other people who were deciding what to do with their life after probably doing quite badly in their A-levels. And we were all having a year off, and I seem to remember working at the post office for a significant amount of time. Yeah, you did.
I've heard of this job in Bedford. It's a famous rite of passage for people in your year, wasn't it? Yeah. Didn't you all used to go back to someone's mum? Someone's mum would cook everyone a breakfast after you'd finished your posting round.
Yeah, my mum used to cook up breakfast. We used to sit there with the Tilstone brothers watching episodes of reruns of Cheers whilst my mum brought in tea and toast and marmalade, when we were meant to be doing the second post.
Yeah. It was a great job.
You remember getting told off, Bales, for being too quick? I mean, this is probably unusual for you, but...
I'm being too efficient, sort of going... I was really keen, so got there, did it, came back and said, right, I'll take the second lot out now, and got sort of yanked aside, I think, by an official shop steward who said, listen, you're just being a little bit too fucking keen, mate. I don't know where you think you're at. So, when you finish your round, go home, have a kip, have your breakfast, come back at 11, right? We'll hang around, smoke a few fags. Yeah. And then you can do the second one if you want to or not. And he goes, it's all right. If you want to, if you sort of get halfway round and you're not really into it, just post them into any post box you've got and we'll do them again tomorrow.
I had exactly the same chap doing the same as you. First day, trying to be really keen, impressed by delivering letters really quickly. That's my first sort of taste of what union life was all about.
A lot of work.
Yeah. And now I teach my kids about what unions do, and I regale them with that postman story. So so that was probably my first job that I remember. I also remember cutting the grass for Bedford County Council.
Yeah.
With the big ride-on mowers, we used to have to go around with the sort of little mowers doing the really fancy. If you're a painter and decorator, it would be the cutting in bit. But this was like going around the trees or the bits of the pavement that they haven't quite reached, and wandering all around Bedford in a pair of steel toe cap boots to all the different parks and those great big sort of containers that you'd find at the back of Bedford Park, which would actually be a sort of restroom full of sort of old leather chairs and stacked with pornographic literature. Yeah, I did that. Tim Harris and I worked at the Shanks McEwen Brogborough landfill site. Get this, our job was picking up litter at a landfill site. How ridiculous was that? And we got sacked from that because we were so bad at doing that. They caught us playing cards behind a sort of mound of rubbish where we'd spent about 3 hours playing cards. And then they sacked us on the spot, and Tim Harris said, don't worry, we're going to go home. And they said, well, how are you getting home? And he said, oh, in my dad's BMW. And then we sort of wheel span out of the car park. Ridiculously rude, but quite funny at the time.
I think it might have been Matt Kavanagh that sacked you, because I was in management as a temp with Matt Kavanagh. We were recruited to do some kind of like bookkeeping thing, and Caravan got really into it, and he was like, oh, you're not doing it right. Basically, I think it was loads of files about numbers, as far as I could tell. And then he was going, no, you're putting them in the wrong place. And I was like, oh, that doesn't matter, Matt. It doesn't matter. and then he basically sacked me, and I think he sacked some other people as well. He might have been part of his sort of like weird,
rationalization of the business.
He let power go to his head.
Yeah.
Where
is he now? Where is he now? That's what we say.
Yeah. What does he know now? Hey,
quite a lot it transpires. So yeah. So yeah, after school, I had a year off. Went to university. Did a few bar jobs when I was at university, which I imagine we all did, didn't we?
Yes.
Kind of. Yeah.
What did you do? What did you do, Frank?
I did a year in a bar, not even a year, a few months in a bar in my gap year before I went to university. And I could talk for 2 or 3 hours on all of the embarrassing things I got wrong in terms of serving drinks and not understanding how anything worked. I don't know, when I was 18, I just, I would never ask if I didn't know, Now I just go, well, what's that? No, sorry, I don't understand. Tell me. But at the time, being 18, I was, oh, right. Yeah, fine. That would be my response to any situation where someone told me to do something I didn't know what it was. So I would just go, oh, right. Yeah. And then walk away and fuck it all up massively.
Yeah, I had a situation. I worked at Russell's on the embankment in Bedford, that restaurant overlooking the suspension bridge.
Yeah.
And, working behind the bar there. And somebody came in and as their dinner aperitif asked for a Noilly Prat, and I had absolutely no idea what a Noilly Prat would be. And obviously I took the same approach as you. I nodded sagely and then looked like I knew what I was doing, sort of guessed at what size glass you might have a Noilly Prat in, and I was thinking it could be some weird crafty beer of some description. So I got out a pint glass and this very well-heeled bloke looked at me very strangely. And then he just, as I sort of fumbled around and thought, well, he's looked at me strangely, maybe I should chuck some ice into it. So I chucked some ice into it. He looked at me even strangely. And then I thought, oh, shall I bluff this out? Shall I bluff this out? And then he put me out of my misery and he pointed to the bottle. And then he pointed to the correct glass, at which point it was all fine. But I was like you, I'd never sort of say, well, I don't know what it is. Can you show me? That was like, that's admitting defeat, isn't it?
No. You were always told if you went to public school, you'd have all this confidence and stuff. But I didn't have it. I remember starting another job in an office, and the first time the phone rang, it may as well have been a bomb about to go off. I can't answer the phone. I don't know how to do that. All that money spent on our education.
Well, when I worked as a
sorry, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, when I worked as an electronics salesman back in after I'd left university, I got chucked a Yellow Pages and said, "Crack on, go to the boardroom. There's a phone. There's a Yellow Pages. Just phone up loads of people and ask whether they're in the market for buying some electronics." Yeah. And that was the sort of extent of my sort of sales training.
There you go. And what did you do? Did you just go in there and just start with A?
No, I started with E. I reckon if I went for electronics or electrical, I'd stand more of a chance. So there was a bit of a filtering process. And I got 3 sets of Yellow Pages, one from sort of North Birmingham and then into Shropshire and then into sort of mid Wales. And so I thought I'll start with where it's most populated and work outwards. And I was never very successful as a salesman. I was never good at selling.
I had a sales job when I was at uni, and my approach was to just phone, selling some industrial bollocks, some industrial cleaner or something. And my approach was to phone people in Northamptonshire, and which is sort of where my parents lived, and ask them if they played golf. And then if I could get them talking about golf in Northamptonshire, I go, oh, and my dad used to play golf. So that was like a way in. I could try and get, and it worked a few times. And then
these are strangers. These are people you found in the Yellow
cold
Pages.
Cold calling companies.
You'd ask if they played golf.
And I'd say, I'd make small talk, doing anything nice at the weekend, And if they said golf, I'd say, oh, right, and I'm in. And it was awful. But after a few weeks, I wanted to kill myself anyway. So I'd already decided I was going to leave. And this guy said, yes, golf, and got in. And I was like, oh, Delapre. He said, no, Wellingborough golf. club, actually. I said, oh, my father belongs to that. Anyway, he turned out he was a good friend of my dad's. And I said, oh, right, well, forget all of this then, because this is just a load of bullshit. I'm sorry to have wasted your time. And at that point, I realized that the three girls who sat in the little sort of goldfish bowl office at the corner of the room were all listening to our calls. As I said that, they all suddenly popped up and looked at me across the room. And I thought, all right. So, yeah, so in the end, I didn't have to resign because they fired me at the end of the day.
I was really bad at the cold calling, but I was quite good at sort of account management and relationship building and all the rest of it. And when I left this job to do my PGCE, I had a bunch of really good customers who I managed to sweet talk into. If I can ship a year's worth of product to you, I will get a massive commission in my final month, which will pay for my PGCE. And I floated it with pretty much all of my customers. The majority said no. Some of them said, we're going to report you. And it's like, well, I don't care. And then the really good ones were like, yeah, we'll take a year's worth of product and we'll just send it back and you get the commission. And so I left with my biggest ever sales month, my last month. Everyone's saying, what are you doing? Why are you leaving electronics? You've sold hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of product. And a lot of it I had still in the boot of my car. So when I returned my Renault Leguna, they found like sort of 20 grand's worth of electronic components sat in the back of my car.
Nice one. Good work.
That's pretty much my job. Yeah.
So when you were a child, was selling electronics your dream job? Was that where you wanted to go?
No, I fell into that by accident and to help a friend out from university who got a finder's fee for getting his mates to get a job. And if we stayed for 3 months, he got 300 quid.
Right.
And I thought, well, how hard can it be to sell electronics? I'll go and do it. He'll get 300 quid. I get to drive a company car for 3 months. And,
a good friend for 300 quid.
Yeah, absolutely. Back in the day, that was a lot of money. Oh, and I also had to tell a lie to get the job as well, because it required me to drive a car and I didn't have a driving license at the time. I had a provisional license. So I sort of told a bit of a fib on my CV. I just said clean driving license. I omitted to say that it was purely provisional.
Yeah,
went
no
for the
points.
interview, got the job, quite surprised. And then they said, you'll start in 4 weeks. And I thought, well, how hard can it be to drive? I'll obviously smash it in 4 weeks. I've got this public school self-confidence. How hard can driving be? Well, I spectacularly failed. And then I had to ring my boss up and say, oh, by the way, when I said I had a clean license, it was only provisional and I've just sort of failed my test. And he thought, quite a hilarious story. Don't worry about it. Get your test in another 4 weeks. So booked in for my test, went and did it, failed it again. By this time, the record's getting a bit monotonous and my boss wasn't really sort of as keen the second time around when I phoned him. And he said, right, well, there's another training course coming up in 6 weeks' time, and if you haven't got your license by then, we'll have to can the job. And fortunately, I managed to fluke it and got the job.
Wow, that's a lot of pressure on your driving test, as if it's not bad enough.
Yeah.
No, I quite like the pressure. I quite like that sort of. It's got to mean something. So you've got to. I quite like that. It's a bit like sort of cramming for an exam that you've done no work for 2 years for and trying to cram it all in sort of 8 hours and multiple coffees and Pro Plus.
So you had this sales job.
Yeah.
What was it that led you to think, actually, I think I'd like to be a teacher?
I'd like to say it was a sort of road to Damascus, but really it was a sort of M42 and M5 and M6 for countless thousands of miles, just sat there going, you know what, I essentially could be selling anything. I could be selling paper, I could be selling industrial cleaner, I could be selling paper clips, whatever. It wasn't really very taxing. It was good fun. I enjoyed having a company car. I enjoyed the perks of being a salesman and the commission, and I had a car with a car phone in, one of the ones with the sort of still had a lead. And I used to whiz around Birmingham with my sort of Alan Partridge driving gloves on, with Roachford's Cuddly Toy playing at high volume. And yeah, it was pretty dull. And I just thought, you know what, there must be something more to life than doing this. Yeah.
So you did a PGCE. Tell us.
I did do a PGCE, and that probably stems back to the school reports I've got from primary school, where I had a teacher when I was about 7 years old who said, it said on my school report, your son should become a teacher. He has a really good way with the other kids in terms of teaching them. And then in one of my school reports from Bedford Modern, I can't remember who it was wrote it, but they said something similar as well. So maybe the seed had been sown then. I don't know.
Were your parents teachers or anything like that? What did your parents do?
My dad was in the RAF. My mum was an RAF wife. So no, we were pretty far removed from teaching.
But you must have been, I guess, influenced positively by some of the teachers you're exposed to at BMS.
Yeah, of course. Everyone is. And I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be in a good way, does it? I mean, it can be in a bad way, it can be in an indifferent way, and different teachers inspire you in different ways. Like Dave Kendall, who taught me religious studies, was a great bloke and gave me a love for learning. Did he teach me anything else? Not really, but there are house masters. There's people like Chris Nicholson, who inspired you just by his sheer passion and love for literature. Sports teachers who ferried us around the country for endless hours, putting up with awful chat in the back seat of a minibus. I mean, that's a labor of love. And when you sit back and think about it, they invest an awful lot of time in your development. And like I said to you last week, Bales, I mean, I really enjoyed my time at school.
Yeah, so did I.
It was fantastic. And the crying shame is, if I look at my results from what I got, is that's how we get measured on how well we did at school. My results were awful, but my experience of school was fantastic. And I think that's probably more important, because nobody's ever asked me about my A-level results.
No,
I don't think.
same here. And even when they did, I lied. Tell us more about Chris Nicholson. I always thought that you're right. It was his level of commitment that was most impressive. Do you think you take elements of the way he taught into the way that you teach?
Oh, you've got to have a passion for it. And I think one of the little prompt questions you gave me was, what advice would you give somebody to go into teaching? And it's got to be your passion. It's got to be your vocation of what you genuinely want to do. And I wasn't sure when I went into teaching whether I had that. I just thought, let's give it a go as a career, and actually found out that I really enjoyed it. I'm quite good at it. And I want to help shape young people's lives. And that sounds really cliched, but as a teacher, that's what you do. And you get great pleasure and enjoyment from seeing that happen. And that's not just A stars and people going to Cambridge. That's people who you get through their GCSEs so that they can go and do a plumbing apprenticeship somewhere after knowing their backstory of troubled home life, etc., etc. And if you're going to do it, you don't go into teaching for the money. You might go in for the holidays, but you've got to go in it because that's what you want to do. And Chris Nicholson dedicated his whole life to doing that, and he was unwavering in that commitment to it. And you've got to respect that. And at no point did the mask ever slip. Did you ever see him with his hair not fully slicked back in full teaching mode every time you saw him. And I never really saw him outside of school to see whether did he have the same demeanor or did he have that same professional mask on. And he lived it.
Yeah. No, he was phenomenal. It's funny, the other day, do you remember, did he ever, I think it was an assembly once, and he was talking about Gödel, Escher and Bach. Do you remember that?
I remember a lot of them having a lot of German opera in, and words that, or composers that I never knew whether it was a verb or a name or whatever. And I just used to just soak it up because he spoke so beautifully. Sometimes you couldn't get the gist of what he was saying, the full nuance of it, but you'd get the gist of it just by the passion and what he said and how he said it and how he delivered it was absolutely incredible.
Canard tempo, right?
Canard tempo, absolutely.
Tempo. Yeah.
And the dark tunnel of adolescence, obviously.
What was our tempo?
Canard was a
was
Hungarian. After you,
Oh, I thought
he was a conductor, wasn't he?
Yes,
he was a conductor, and as I remember the story, it was all to do with Goethe's. Was it Goethe and the Ring Cycle, or was that Wagner? Wagner's Ring Cycle, and this guy, Canard, this conductor, just delivered it so beautifully, and he understood the nuance of what the composer was trying to get to, and he had this wonderful tempo which went up and down, and he managed the music, and the music became bigger than it was just because of his sympathetic handling of the material. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. That's exactly it. And he and I think and the way that Chris Nicholson would finish that, he would say, well, he always waited a beat. That was his thing. He said that apparently Canard would, not only was he sort of hugely sympathetic, but he would always just hold for a second longer than everyone else, because that would add drama to something which is, let's be honest, is pretty dramatic anyway, right?
Yeah.
Imagine having the balls to stand in front of a load of 12 and 13-year-old boys and decide that this would be your medium for conveying some sort of message. Presumably it wasn't just him ranting about opera. He had it was some
about
or something, was it?
About holding yourself, as a good human being, I think.
But he was he did it, didn't he? I mean,
yeah,
we would all have been
landed. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, we would all aspire to be a teacher like that, because that can't be manufactured. That comes from the heart, and that comes from a passion, and like I said, that sort of unwavering commitment to that's what he was doing, and he believed in it. And I've just come from an inset day today where we've been taught about teaching to the top and how we must challenge all students, and we're going to teach them to grade 9 at GCSE and A star at A level. Chris Nicholson was doing that 30 years ago, telling 13-year-old boys about Wagner and opera and tempo. Wow, I mean, he was teaching to the very top there, because for most of us, that just went over our heads, but we sat there because he performed it and he sold it. And we sat there cross-legged, and no one uttered a word, as I remember it. We would sit there and we would be enthralled by the whole thing.
Well, 30 years later, we still talk about Canard tempo. And ironically, like you say, I mean, I've got no interest in Wagner. I had no idea what he was actually talking about. But I do remember sort of walking out of the sort of the assembly thinking, yeah, do you know what? He's got a point. Like if you did just hold back a second, you are that little bit cooler.
And has that stood you in good stead?
Well, you can tell. I mean, I remembered it. I mean, there
was a BBC radio series. Do you know about this of inspiring teachers, and he was on it. He was chosen as one of them on a BBC radio program just about him. And
I did. I think I saw that in an old boys newsletter or some communication from the old boys, and never got around to listening to it. I probably should.
Yeah, he was like, and Digger Roberts was another one who you mentioned the silence, that somehow even the naughtiest kids would not play up in the presence of Chris Nicholson or Digger.
He had a different technique though, didn't he? More about being friendly with you. And he said, look, we've got to get through this work. And if you help me out, maybe at the end of the lesson, we can have 5 minutes where we just sort of josh about and have a bit of banter. And he was all about that relationship and how it's sort of, we're in it together, we're fighting against the system. And if you just help me out, I'll give you 5 minutes at the end of the lesson. That's how I remember Digger Roberts.
Yeah. He got every single boy in my class passed O-level geography. Even the kids who got no other O-level, they just got geography. But everyone passed. And the last lesson before the exam, when normally every other teacher would be desperately trying to cram you in, he said, well, we've sorted it. So he wheeled in the VCR on a trolley. We watched we did a double lesson, so it was 2 hours or whatever. So we watched Terminator.
Yeah, but you all passed though.
And everyone passed, yeah. So extraordinary man. It's sad. Him and Archie Coughlin.
Yeah.
Those were two guys who went out of their way when I was in all sorts of trouble in the sixth form, and took me, did things extracurricularly to help me out and sort me out and try and keep me in the school basically. And those would be the people I always wanted to thank most once I'd grown up a bit and stopped being such an idiot. And they bloody died within a year or two of us leaving school. Bloody hell. The two people I really wanted to say thank you to. And then, and Chris Nicholson went not long after, I think. I sometimes feel like getting in touch with their kids just to say, did you know your dad was an amazing guy? And
so what happened to you, Frank, in terms of your journey, in terms of you? So you're now in education.
Yeah.
Now, 30 years ago, we wouldn't have said that, would we?
No. I was the same as you, Ed. I got to 30, and for reasons that it was not, I just thought, I'll do this. This will, have a crack at this, but I had no belief that I was going to become sort of like a thing I really loved. And I'd basically gone traveling and run out of money, and I thought, well, I want to carry on traveling, so I'll do a TEFL course. So I became a TEFL teacher, and then in the end ended up staying in London because you got the whole world come to you. And I loved it. I just thought I'll do it for a year and that'll be that. But here I am. So now I teach at university. And
I never had the plan like you. I just sort of fell into it and thought, I think I might be quite good at this, and I've loved it pretty much for the 23 years I've done it. It's been best thing I've ever done. But I'm glad I did something before it though, that I've got a bit of life experience to share with the kids, because I think they appreciate that. Yeah,
definitely.
Give us a year one, so rookie teacher mistake. What did you do that was appalling and would have had you barred or jailed in the current world?
As I'm still practicing in the profession and my name won't get edited out, I won't divulge too much that would have got me struck off. But I did get given in my PGCE year the lesson that most trainee teachers get given, the year 10 sex education lesson as an observed lesson. I was doing really, I'm a business and economics teacher. I was doing okay on my training. I was at a nice high school in Bromsgrove, really thriving department. We had big numbers. They were good kids. They were all sort of super keen. And I thought I was doing quite well. And they said, well, just to mix things up a bit, you need to teach some PSHCE. Okay, that's fine. What are we doing? And they said, oh, it's the sex education module. And it was like, oh, alarm bells are ringing now. I've been really stitched up here. And I had to do the lesson on contraception. And back in the day, the way it was taught, you got given a black bag and it was full of different methods of contraception. And I was like, what do I do with this? How am I going to string out a lesson on contraception with a mixed year 10 class? It's going to be awful. But I cobbled together a decent lesson, had them working in groups. They all got a chance to sample in their groups, the different contraception methods, and they wrote out the advantages and disadvantages. They presented to the other groups, and one of the methods of contraception was obviously the condom, and they got the phallus on which to roll the condom on. They got to actually practice putting the condom on. So anyway, at the end of the lesson, when I'm doing my plenary, I've remembered the fact we had a starter, we had a bit of teacher input, we had a group discussion, the Ofsted lesson's going really well, and all my mentors were outside the room, and it was a room where you could there were a couple of panes of glass where you could see into the classroom. And they were all outside, and they'd been watching the whole lesson. I'd got through it okay. I hadn't gone too red. The kids hadn't asked me too many difficult questions, which I couldn't answer. And I thought, you know what? I've pulled this off. Maybe a career teaching PSHCE. I'm going to be okay at this. And so I'm wrapping up the lesson. I'm doing the plenary. And there's a boy who's sitting directly in front of me. And the reason he's directly in front of me is because he's the year 10 kid with ADHD. And he is a nightmare. He is usually bouncing off the walls. He's awful in everyone's lesson. And the fact that he sat through a whole lesson for 55 out of 60 minutes and not killed anyone, not got the scissors out, not started a fight, not thrown anything at me, I'm thinking I've done really well there. And Richard Russell, his name was, and he was sat there directly in front of me. And I'm doing my summing up, and I'm moving my hands around, and I'm getting really quite excited. It's been a really good lesson. And Richard Russell is at the front, and his hand is up, and he's shaking it at me. And I'm saying, Richard, just a minute, I'm finishing up. And he's waving at me, and he's getting more and more irate. He's going redder and redder and redder. And suddenly he just blurts out, "Sir, sir." And I say, "Richard, what is it?" And he said, "Sir, put the bloody dick down." And I've been holding for the last 5 minutes this phallus in my hand, which I've been waving around in front of these year 10s. At which point, all my mentors who've been watching the lesson and I've gone from suddenly being outstanding to unsatisfactory.
Oh, I'm sure it was cool, really, Ed.
Mr. Cock. Is Mr. Cock coming back?
Mr. Cock. But he did that kid did it for the best reasons. He just wanted me to stop embarrassing myself because I'd been waving this sort of 8-inch cock around, and he was just mortified for me. Yeah. Sir, put the dick down. Yeah. What a lovely kid. I wish I could thank him for that.
Well, we'll track him down for you.
Thank you.
So, how many different you've taught in lots of different places, Ed? Or you've been in?
Yeah, I started in a mixed comprehensive in Evesham, which is just sort of North Worcestershire.
It's Worcester,
yeah, that's right. So it's north of Worcester, and you'd think Evesham would be a lovely place to start your teaching career. It is if you go to Evesham and teach at Prince Henry's, which is the old grammar school where everyone tries to get their kids to. I was teaching in the Evesham High School, so we had quite a big traveller population, lots of fruit pickers. It was quite rough, but as a way to start off your teaching career, that's the best place to go. And my first Ofsted, I missed all of it because we got to take the leisure and tourism group out for a whole week, where we just drove them in the minibus around Worcestershire, because if they'd have been in the school, we would have failed our inspection.
Well, you packed all the troublemakers into a minibus and drove them
around. And we just drove them around. Because they were doing leisure and tourism, you could take them pretty much anywhere and just say, well, this is a park, this is leisure, it's a bit of tourism.
And you seem to spend a lot of time sort of in North Birmingham, Worcestershire, West Midlands. Why?
Just circumstance. That's where my sales office was when I was selling electronics. My now wife, who I met at university, she came from Solihull. She got a job in Birmingham.
That was lovely.
Where we lived wasn't not so much, but she got a job in Birmingham in recruitment, and we were living in Droitwich at the time. And so when I did my PGCE, I went to University College Worcester and did my teacher training there.
What's been your favourite place of working and your worst place of working?
We'll go with Australia as my favourite place of working.
Oh, okay. So I didn't know you went there.
Yeah, 2 years. 2 years did my teacher training. Did 2 years at Evesham High School. Got married after my first year, and we'd been married for a year. My wife said, "Got an opportunity with work to go anywhere in the world. Where do you fancy going?" We looked at the map, chose Australia. They gave us an option of Perth or Brisbane. Chose Brisbane. Went there for 2 years. Stayed for 7.
Wow. All in Brisbane.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how is it different teaching in Australia to teaching in the UK?
In terms of the actual teaching, not much. Teenage kids are teenage kids. They just have a different accent, wear a different uniform. Horrible uniforms in Australia. They all look like they're at Summer Bay High School. Dreadful pinstripe uniforms. All the boys wear shorts up until 18 with long socks. Yeah, horrible uniforms. But essentially, they're teenage kids. They're just teenage kids with a different accent. They all have the same issues, same problems. Just love teaching there. In terms of the education system, lots of the schools are private schools, but they're private schools who are subsidised by the church. So I worked in a all-girls school, which was Catholic. I taught an all-boys school, which was run by monks of some weird Catholic order. And I also taught another all-girls Presbyterian school. And they all ask you the same question. Do you agree with our ethos? Are you a practicing Catholic Presbyterian, whatever the strange order of monks was? And you say no, but you say all religions are essentially the same. Be kind to people, do unto them as you do to them.
So your A-level in religious studies came in handy at last.
It did, yeah. I mean, it's the only time it's actually helped me. But
now, the timing in the British Army has always been 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Came back to the UK because of kids having a family, being on the other side of the world, grandparents, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I lined up 7 interviews in 2 weeks. My first interview was at Millfield School. I'd flown in on the Friday night and I had an interview on the Saturday morning at Millfield School. And that was interesting. And didn't get the job, obviously. But I found out that my daughter would get reduced fees and the pony could be stabled for free at their equestrian centre, which was great. But didn't get the job there. Went through a whole series of interviews, got offered 3 of them, and then a job came up at Maidstone Grammar School. And I phoned them up on the off chance because the deadline date hadn't passed. And I said, look, I'm leaving the country in 2 days. Can you get me a job interview tomorrow? Because I'm flying out the country. Can you help? And the head's PA at the time said, well, the head's not in. We'll see. I'll see what I can do. And they organised an interview for me, taught my lesson, met my head of department. Everything was going swimmingly. And they said, the headmaster's not here. You'll have to go and meet the deputy head. So we trotted off to the deputy head's office. I knocked on the door. And there was nothing on the door to suggest anything other than it's just a deputy head teacher. So it just said deputy head, knocked on the door. And I walked in and sat behind a piece of paper. I saw the sort of rim of a pair of spectacles. And the deputy head teacher was reading my CV. And he slowly sort of revealed his face from behind the piece of paper. And I looked at him and thought, wow, I really recognize your face. And then his opening gambit in the interview was, who taught you history at Bedford Modern School?
No.
And I sort of scratched my chin.
Smith?
It was Pig Smith. But first of all, I went through the whole list of everybody who taught me history. I was like, so in the first
Muncaster.
year, Dr. Muncaster, he of climbing out of windows and not paying for rounds at the pub, but that's a different story. So I had Dr. Muncaster, and then I got to O-level year, and I said, and then obviously I was taught by Paul Smith, which is you, and he just smiled and said, yes, it is. Now, I don't know whether I got offered the job because of the fact that Paul Smith taught me at Bedford Modern School or not, but it's done me okay. I've done 15 years there, and I worked with Paul Smith for 9 of those years.
So he's retired, is he?
Yeah, he has retired, and he looked exactly the same as he did at school.
Yeah,
well, he's one of those people I hadn't thought about since 1988. I think I've forgotten he existed. But as soon as you said his name, I could picture him.
Yeah, do you remember we called him Pig Smith?
Yeah.
Only because his initials were PGS, and we just put the I in between the P and the G. I mean, that was the level of how hard we thought about nicknames.
I always thought he looked like a sort of louche French aristocrat from the court of Louis XIV. He had sort of like curly golden hair, and he was a little bit flabby, and
nice moustache, big glasses.
Do
you follow Modern Toss?
Yes.
Yeah, there are 2 guys with enormous flared suits and 1970s hair and tashes that always remind me of Paul Smith at dinner parties. drinking Dubonnet and having vol-au-vents.
I remember I had him for history, and I remember him saying, I can't remember what the conversation was, but basically said, look, there is only one sport for gentlemen. And I said, boxing. And he looked at me and he goes, no, it's not fucking boxing. I said, horse racing? He said, no, it's cricket. I was like, oh, okay.
So Paul Smith is one of my favourite memories of school. Do you remember those lessons where everybody gets the giggles and nobody can stop that laughing, which permeates the whole classroom? And I remember it was a Paul Smith history lesson, and he used to sit quite sort of mansplaining on his desk. Open legs with his grey folder of Bismarck from 1870 to 1918.
Yeah,
which he'd dictate notes to us. I mean, the worst teacher in the whole world in terms of an Ofsted lesson, but I remember all of my history, so he must have done something right. And we were in this lesson, and he's explaining something about Bismarck, and suddenly a note gets passed around the classroom, and all it says on the note is "Pigs got the horn," and it looked like he had this huge erection. At which point, 30 15-year-old boys just started giggling, and he just kept us in for the whole lunchtime. But the thing I was proudest of the most is nobody admitted to what had gone on. Everybody kept that code of silence, which I really respect, and I respect it in my kids at school now. If they just say nothing and keep that omerta.
When you sit in front of them with an erection.
No, not when. We can edit that bit out.
Yes, okay.
Bales and air and bales, bales and air and bales, bales and air and bales, bales and air and bales.
Ed, you touched on it there. Something I want to ask. You mentioned how terrible his lessons were by modern standards. That teachers like that just had a folder and read stuff out, and you copied it down and regurgitated it in an essay. Looking back at other teachers we had, who do you think would not make it today in that?
Oh, blimey.
I guess it's different, is it? In a public school, they don't have Ofsted. They can just get away with still doing that.
No, they have. I think HMC they have Headmasters Conference or Her Majesty's Inspectorate for. There is a private school, ISI, I think it is, Independent Schools Inspectorate.
Because I often think, well, I look back now and think, well, that was terrible teaching, especially things like maths when they just gave you a photocopy. But it wasn't a photocopy; it was that sort of purple printed thing.
Oh, the banderole. Yeah, the banderole, which they used to run off hundreds of copies. Yeah,
give you that, and that was that for 2 or 3 years of your, 13 to 16. That was your maths education. Was someone just giving you a sheet to work through?
my maths department would crucify me, but I don't think it's changed much. Now.
Really?
No, I mean, with maths, it's learning a process. So you show the process, you demonstrate the process, you scaffold the process to the kids, and then you say, practice the process.
Yeah. I think the presentation was probably done very quickly in a minute, and then it was 39 minutes of practice, which you couldn't do because you hadn't grasped it in the first minute.
Well, I've just sat through, like I said, I've sat through an inset today where they just say study, test, test, test is the most effective way of kids remembering stuff.
Right.
They didn't actually fill in what comes after the study and what you do with your test results. You don't just have another test. I'm assuming that there is some sort of form of feedback whereby you say to the kids, this is what you've got wrong, this is how you might improve it, and then you do it again and you build on your mistakes.
But I've seen my nephew's maths books from when he was sort of 10, 11, 12. And wow, if someone had presented it to me in that way with interesting pictures and
exactly, much more interactive
application of what it might be used for and stuff, I thought I could probably get this in an afternoon now, But God.
Yeah, well, public schools are a bit different because there aren't the checks and balances that there are in the state sector in terms of they can employ whoever they want. So,
my partner is a secondary school teacher, Ed, and she has one of these questions is from her. I told her about this, and I said, if you could ask one question, what would it be? And so her question was the one: in film and TV depictions of teachers and teaching, what do they get most wrong? She had her own thoughts on this. But
I think they get wrong this sort of idealized view of teaching as being Robin Williams. We just rock up and open the door and recount poetry, and then we go and run in the meadow and the kids learn by that. And the reality is, and your wife will know, that it's a hard slog. And like a 5-period day when you have a year 9 to start with and it goes dreadfully, you don't get any respite. In the commercial world, like I imagine Bales, if he has a bad sales meeting, he probably takes himself off and has a spa day somewhere to recover, and then he's ready for Wednesday. But you've got to be ready. You've got to be ready in 5 minutes time.
Oh man!
And it's sort of relentless, and you've got to put that game face on because they will walk in the room and they don't care that you've had a bad lesson. Yeah. They just want to be sat down in order and they want to learn something, or hopefully they want to learn something.
Yeah, you made exactly the same point she was saying, that she mentioned Dead Poets Society as well, and said that in films and TV, they always just have one class, and that seems to be it. They've just got these 10 boys or whatever that... whereas the reality is, and now another 15 to 30 kids come charging in, and then there'll be another 30 kids, and getting them all to stand on their chairs and shout, "Yes, my captain," or whatever.
Yeah, and I think we do have this idea that it's going to be 15 kids in a class, and you'd probably think, 15's a massive number in a classroom, but I've got an economics set this year 12, so lower 6 economics. I've got 38 kids in it.
Oh my God.
And
doesn't that dilute it though? I mean, I was going to say, does that make it difficult though? It must do.
Yeah, of course it does. But we can't get teachers. There's it's a retention crisis. It's not to do necessarily with recruitment. It's trying to stop people leaving. Recruitment's always been hard. And it's got harder, but it's keeping hold of people because they can go and earn more in the private sector. And so we can't get anyone to fill a vacancy for a business and economics teacher which is not surprising because we're in the southeast. We've got hugely high house prices, and if you're a graduate, why would you come and start on 28 grand a year, which would get you very little in Maidstone? You'd have to have two of you to buy somewhere in Maidstone, and you'd probably have to save for about 5 years to get that deposit. It's difficult.
Yeah. You get that thing in TEFL teaching where people can only afford to be a TEFL teacher if they're the partner of someone who works in the city, and they're almost doing it as a hobby because the other half is earning six figures, and so it's all fine.
Yeah, and they've got their Western guilt, and they think they can sort of think that they're doing the right thing. Yeah. But we have huge classes. In fact, my biggest classes are higher up the school. I've got these 2 year 12 classes, the economics 38, business studies 37. I mean, that's nonsense, and that's not sustainable. And if we don't get somebody next year, I don't know what's going to happen, because just the sheer volume of assessment and everything that you have to give to these kids these days, because parents as a grammar school expect us to be like a sort of diet private school, in that they haven't paid anything, but they want to get the private school experience, which means being able to be assessed every week. But if I've got 38 kids that I need to assess every week, that ain't going to happen.
Yeah. Presumably every little thing you've got to do it you've got to do it 37 times and then 38 times.
Yeah, and you obviously get creative about doing it. You have peer assessment, self-assessment, group assessment. We do model answers together. You do a sample. But there comes a time where you have to mark all 38 pieces of work and write the same comment at the bottom of stop using GPT.
Do you see a lot of that?
Oh, yeah. We don't do any assessments at home anymore. I don't collect work in and mark it, because they'll have just gone home and got the AI bot out, and it will have produced a model answer.
So what do you have to do? Everything handwritten in class kind of thing?
Yeah. Well, that's what they do their exams in. So my reasoning behind it is you're going to have to sit down in 2 years' time and do 3 2-hour exams. So you need to get used to writing under pressure.
Yeah.
But I think the move from the government is for all exams to go online from late 2020s, I think.
All right. So apart from AI, what's changed the most in your job over the years? How has teaching changed?
The red tape, there's more of it. The bureaucracy, the nonsense form filling in, the fact that I can't just go out onto the field and make supply and demand diagrams with rope and cones from the PE department, because I'd have to write a risk assessment for it, and somebody's probably got an intolerance to grass, and they'll have some sort of allergic reaction, and have I brought a first aider with me? No, it's really difficult to get stuff done now. You have to jump through so many hoops. If you're in the private sector, it's easier because there are less hoops to jump through. And there's also, and probably what impacts my job more, is that dynamic between parents and teachers. Parents are so much more demanding and will come in and say, what are you doing for my son, my daughter? We don't agree with what the school says. And whereas I remember when I was at school, if I got into trouble, that meant I got into trouble twice.
Yeah.
You'd go home and say, well, I got a detention, and there would be no discussion about it. It would be a clip round the ear from my dad for getting into trouble at school, and then one for luck, and also the sanction that you get at school. Whereas now parents come in and argue the toss about sanctions and why are you doing that, and don't you know my little Billy's got special needs and all the rest of it. It's quite restrictive.
When I remember we had a parents' evening, my mum had to ask, who am I seeing now? What's their name? I didn't know the names of any of my teachers. Whereas now, sort of younger parents I know, they know the names of all the teachers. They know if they were married, who they've recently got divorced, where they used to work, and that also extends to all of the other kids in the class. They know, oh yes, Henry's blah, 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 and his parents both work at. Blah, blah, blah. I just think my parents had no clue who anybody was in my class who wasn't a friend who'd come over to play or whatever, and had no idea who any of my teachers were or what I did or anything. I mean, maybe that wasn't great, but I think it was fairly common across all that generation and every generation previously to have no real input, no real awareness, just like you go and get on with it. And
and you'd trust the teachers implicitly.
Yeah.
They would say this, and as parents, I think my mum and dad would have just gone, right, that's what's happening.
Yeah.
What are you like as a parent, Bales? I can imagine you're fairly involved.
I'm brilliant.
Helicopter Bales, they call him.
Yeah, I like to think, minimizing the damage is my style. Encouraging and more than occasionally getting it wrong, I think is a probably fair assessment, but not strict. I'm on the sort of the permissive end of the scale.
And what age are your two?
17, 17 and 13. It's interesting listening to you talk because it's recently she was like, Dad, I'm gonna get to the gym to revise. I was like, right, but it's a gym. She said, yeah, but listen, the quiet rooms at school just aren't quiet enough. And I said, well, what's the problem? Well, there's just people talking rubbish in the quiet rooms. I said, well, why don't you ask them to stop talking if that's, no, but they say stupid things. I know, but that's not you're not gonna have an enhanced studying environment in a gym. So I think she was just trying to pull a fast one. Maybe she just wants to go to the gym.
You might be right.
Yeah, exactly. So I did, I made the threat, which is okay. Well, give me the name of the person who's in charge of the quiet rooms, and I'll get in touch with them and see if there's a way that we can. No, you don't need to do that. I'll do it. So then the next day, I said, "Did you speak to Miss Ross?" Yeah, it's fine. She sorted it out. Oh, there you go.
And what about your youngest? How are they as a student?
Limited. But really good at rugby. So he loves football, rugby, and Muay Thai. He does a lot of martial arts. So I'm not sure what he's like as a student though. I think he might be taking it a bit too easy. So the sort of the general sort of consensus amongst his teachers is Teddy's lovely and he's nice and he's polite and he's friendly and he's always helping other people, but he doesn't give a fuck about work, which does sound remarkably familiar.
Yeah, I was gonna say everyone likes him, doesn't give a fuck about work.
Yeah, doesn't really matter. But I think they're all right. I think Scarlett will do all right. Teddy, he wants to be in the army, so it doesn't matter, does it?
No, I've got a kid that I teach in year 11 who wants to go into the army because he's seen that as the path of least resistance. And he was in the CCF at school in the army section. He gave that up after 6 weeks because it was too hard. And I know his dad outside of school. I said, so what's Harry wanting to do? And he said, he wants to join the army. And I said, hasn't he just left the CCF? And he said, yes. And I said, so why is he joining the army? And he said, well, he only needs to get grade 4s and 5s, which means he doesn't have to do any work. And it was like, oh, okay. And that's quite indicative of sort of year 11 boys. They have that sort of anything to get out of doing a stitch of work, and they will go, well, I'm going to join the army because it's the easiest option. Not the fact that we could get killed in sort of a major world conflict, but
that's
the
abstract to them at that age.
About at school.
I made the mistake of, in a bid to sort of discourage him, but appearing to be helpful, that sort of reverse ferret of parenting. I said, listen, I've got some friends who are in the army, and I tell you what, why don't you talk to them first? So I pinged Rory Hall on Facebook, and Right, so Rory Hall is the worst possible person I could have chosen for that. So, he's super relaxed. He had a great time. He's really cool. And you're like, oh god, wrong guy. He looks about 15. Really annoying. I thought, oh no, I need to find someone who's like properly tortured.
Ed, what about you? Your kids are how old?
18, just off to university. Next year, Sunday she flies to Australia for a year.
Wow.
And
is she going to be following your footsteps?
What, divinity at Durham? Not quite. No, she's off to Leeds to do politics.
That's a good one.
Yeah, she's really into politics. She spent a week's work experience at the Houses of Parliament with our local Tory MP, even though her politics are very different. But she went there for the experience, and also because I tutored the MP's son, and she said, if ever you need a favour, don't hesitate to ask. So called in the favour and got her a week's worth of work experience at the Houses of Parliament. So it's not who you know, it's what you know. What you know, who you know.
Pulling all the strings there, Ed, down in Kent.
Oh, absolutely.
Can I ask, we'll let you go soon, can I ask you, from looking back from an educational point of view, you shared a classroom with this man, Mr. Bales. What was he like as a student then?
I don't remember spending much time in a classroom with Bales, to be honest.
Yeah.
I don't think we shared many of the same set.
Same things.
I can't remember you being in history.
No, or economics.
And at A level, you did. Did you do classics or classics?
I did classics. Yeah.
What else did you do?
I did economics. I did business studies. So with Doc Richards.
Commerce, as it was then.
Yes.
It's a disparaging. Commerce.
Yeah, exactly.
Not a proper subject.
No, and then they made it more sexy and accessible by calling it business studies.
Yeah.
And we've now dropped the studies because people, as a studies, they think it's a bit of a DOS. So you get rid of the studies and it's just purely business now. It's quite has quite a lot of gravitas.
I'm thinking about that and the dirty word that commerce is, and Chris Nick telling my parents once at parents' evening, they were sort of saying, "Oh, what do you think you should do?" And I think at that point I said, "Oh, I want to be an anthropologist because it sounded like a cool thing to do." And he said, "No, Andrew would be much better as a salesman." And my dad and my mum were like, "Oh, how dare you?" And he goes, "No, but people like British Aerospace, they make huge amounts of money selling weapons." And Chris Nick thought, selling guns.
Lovely boy. Seems to be an arms dealer, international arms dealer,
or drugs.
Now, Martin,
yes,
or Frank, as I find it really difficult to call you, right. Martin. I never ever shared a classroom with you, but I did share a boarding house with you for many years. And Bales, I always seem to remember Bales from the boarding house because you seem to spend an inordinate amount of time there. Why did you spend all that time there where you had a perfectly good house down the road in Bedford?
Just the company.
Saw the best people were there.
Yeah, exactly. All my friends were there, and it made sense.
It's not as bad as Harris, who actually became a boarder, even though he lived hundreds of yards away.
Yeah, I never.
Yeah, well, I had that as well. When my dad came out of the RAF and they'd bought their house in Bedford, they said to my brother and I, they said, "So, do you want to become day boys now that the RAF aren't paying for it? It would sort of make sense." And we flatly refused. We were like, "No, we love being in the boarding house. It was amazing."
Oh, it's great to have you back, but no.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm going to have to go. So,
Ed, you were brilliant. Thank you.
You were fantastic.
Well, thank you for inviting me for this podcast. I look forward to. What's the platform that we get in on?
Well, we haven't set it up. It's Acast, but it's not live yet, mate. But we're going to get a few in the bag, and then learn how to edit them all together, and stick a jingle on the front.
Sons of the spreading eagle crest, nurtured here in a homely nest till the time draws nigh when we long to fly. North and south and east and west, let us honour the name, let us cherish the fame.